So today's project, we're going to work on the sidewalk around our pool here. As you can tell from the video, the sidewalk is raised up. It's lifted up a good 2 inches. It's actually collapsed down in a little bit on this side. And this next piece has also been jockeyed up. I'm going to be able to, I hope, move this piece by itself. This one I may need to rent a saw and then cut another stress release line like these are. These are stress lines so that they can shift if they need to without cracking the concrete. And I may split this one in half just to make it easier to cut. But the reason these are shifted is this tree that was left to grow here by the pool that we cut down last year. You can see it in another video, and it's shoved up this edge of the concrete. So we need to get this lifted up out of the way, and then we can work on the ground underneath, probably saw the roots of this tree out of the way, and then hopefully get it back in place without doing any damage to the concrete. Sections of concrete like this are very heavy, 4-inch, like a 4-inch square foot. 1 square foot section is going to be 150 pounds. So a section like this is probably going to be 600 to 700, even 800 pounds, depending on the thickness and how much concrete is underneath there. It could vary between 4 inches and 5 inches, or maybe even a little less, possibly 3 inches on some sections. All depends on what they were pouring on top of and who was doing the job. The biggest challenge, of course, is getting this lifted up. I've got some ideas of what I'm going to do, but first we need to dig down underneath here so I can get to the bottom section of this, so we can start working on what we're going to do to get that pulled up and out of there. Here's what I've come up with. I've got some blocks down there. I use an old piece of decking board that was rotted out at the end, cut it up and set it across the section of stone that I'm leaving for the moment, so I can lift this piece up. I've got a 4x4 as an anchor. I've got a big C-clamp clamped to the stone with a hefty chain connected to it. And then I've got a bottle jack here that I can use to jack up the end of my 4x4, and it is actually raising the block of concrete without too much effort. As soon as we get this lifted up here, I'm going to stick something underneath it. Certainly do not want to use my hands, because that's a lot of weight, especially at a pinch point. Sounds like my jack just exceeded its limit, so I need to brace it underneath there, and then I can crank up my centerpiece. Once we got that side up, I was able to move the jack and jack this side up, and now we can get something under this here and then work on bringing up the front, and then we can put braces underneath and then just roll it off on top of those braces. We'll use pipe to roll that off with. With a bottle jack and the right leverage, you can move anything. And the plan now is to get some pipe and then just roll the concrete slab down along the beams. However, I quickly discovered that the cost of PVC has gone up astronomically, so I had to come up with a different solution, and this is what I ended up coming up with. And we're just going to dub over my talking here because I did not have a microphone on me and it just wasn't picking up. So this is what I came up with, and I used a chain system and a come along that I picked up from Harbor Freight. It only cost me 25 bucks. I had the chain already, and you can actually just come along the concrete slab. It's even being about 800 pounds, it's easy to move. Just hook it up to the beams there and I can just drag it right across, and it seemed to work out pretty well that way. So the main problem here is that this tree root has grown down and grown underneath this section. That's what lifted it up, and then dirt settled down in here. So now with this exposed, I'll probably move it a little bit farther yet, but with this exposed I can dig down into here, get rid of this tree root, get rid of all this dirt that's come underneath it, level it off, bring this back, and then put it back into place. This is the kind of stuff that was falling off the bottom. These 4x4s I picked up from the coal pile at Lowe's, so they were half off anyways, so I'm not worried about digging them up, but they're not bad, so I should be able to reuse them. So before we can put this back in place, we need to get rid of the tree roots that are holding everything up, literally, here. And there's the view of how that's pushing up the stone. And I need to cut it up here, down here, get all this out, and I'm going to try using this stone cutting blade on this grinder, which I call the finger remover, and that should cut through that without hurting anything. If you use a chainsaw, of course, you're going to dull your blades in the stones and the dirt and everything else, but hopefully this will work. And I also need to cut off all this stone that's sticking out. So when the concrete is poured, they go through and they use a saw to cut down 1.5 inches here for an expansion seam. So if an expansion like this happens, it's going to split the rest of the way like this did and not totally destroy the concrete and break up into crazy seams. So we're going to use that same grinder to flatten this out. So when I go to slide it back into place over here, it's going to go down nice and straight rather than getting stuck on the sides like it did when I tried to pull it out. So I got this all cleared out, leveled and ready to go, and I was trying to get ready to move this back and digging out along the edge here, and inadvertently found out why the piece next to it is raised up, and you can just see it there. There is another tree root coming through. So I need to move my concrete block farther. There's a better view of it. And that's what's holding up the edge of that section of concrete. I need to move my concrete block further this way so that I can get to that piece. So the pulley wasn't working. I ended up just using big long breaker bars, a lever, and shoving it that way. And now I can get to this root, which is the root of my problem. And it's going underneath that block right there. And it's also holding up this corner of this slab. So I'm gonna cut this out. Maybe I can get underneath it over here, which would be great. So I can lower that down. But I'm gonna cut that out, and then the piece will be able to go down there. For the sake of repeating myself, this is why you do not let a tree grow next to a patio or a pool, people. That is really big. And I have to cut that one out, and there's no way that I can cut underneath that to get that out. I'm gonna have to pull that other piece up. But for right now, I need to get this out, get this piece back in place. And we got an event coming up. I'm not gonna have time to pull that other section out. I can get it down where it needs to be. This one down where it needs to be. That one's still gonna be sticking up like it is. But as Willie Nelson says, there's nothing I can do about it now. So we'll get this cut out, we'll get this piece back in place where it needs to be. And for this one, I'm going to try to do a little sawzall action with my Bosch sawzall and see if I can get that cut out a little bit easier. There's one. Now I gotta cut this other one out, and that's gonna take 2 hands. Once again, people, never let a tree grow next to a pool or a patio. That is the root that I finally got out. Sawzalls actually worked pretty good for that. I got it sliced here on the edge so that my piece can go down alongside of where it was, and it's no longer holding it up. Now I just need to level this surface out and get that piece back in place. But this root is out of there, and it actually came out into 4 or 5 different offshoots that I had to cut off that were going down deeper into the ground. So I think another year and this tree would have definitely broken the side of the pool. I don't for the life of me know how it managed not to already. Just got extremely lucky, I guess. I'm ready to put this back down as soon as I fill in the hole that I had to make to get around this thing. So I needed more room for my jack and come along to pull with these shifted that way so I could get my come along in between them, and just jacking it up to take the pressure off of this, allow me to slide it forward, do the same on the other side, and then I'll be able to brace again off of that and then pull it across those and then set them down. All right, I got my beams pulled out farther, just my shade, and come along and back up. And now I can continue to pull. And we are almost back in place. A little crooked. I think I'll fix it with the bar here. Going down in is a little easier. You can try it up. Make sure you have something on the deck surface to protect your support block out. Let it down a section at a time. And then go to the other side and repeat until you're back into place. All right, we're getting closer. All I need to do now is check that back up and then square it in the hole. Get it squared because it's rubbing on this side and it doesn't want to drop down. It's closer here than it is over there. Kind of hard to see in the camera. We'll get that square and it should pop right down in place. And then I can jack it up as needed and maybe scoop some dirt out or pack some dirt in just to get it down where it needs to go. There's nothing on the back side here, so it's got to be hitting on this concrete edge. As I mentioned it would when I was grinding it off the stonework. But that's a project for another day. I think I'm going to need to actually use a second person for this, primarily because I need to jack it up, pry it over, and have somebody stand here to hold this corner down when I let it down. Because right now, when I let it down, it's just shifting right back and holding on this spot over here, and it's not dropping into place. I just had to raise it back up and readjust the surface. It wasn't quite level. A little hump in the middle, but hopefully I have it fixed now. And here is the finished product. It is not perfect. I did not expect it to be perfect. I expected it to not trip everybody that tries to walk across it. And we're up maybe 1/4 of an inch. The main walking area, not really up at all. Very little compared to what it was. All that big tree stump is gone. Cut right there. Now, I will preface with you really shouldn't put sand in your expansion seams. I did put sand here primarily because I wanted it to go down and into any gap that might be underneath the stone, which there was some, especially over on this corner. So I put a fair amount of sand down in through there. And if you'll remember right in the video, which for you was just a few seconds ago, for me was a couple days ago, we still have a big piece of tree root holding this section up. So this is still sitting up pretty high. We're going to leave that for now. We've got a slide that's going in this area, kind of where I'm standing, and we wanted this to be level. Overall, I'm happy with how it turned out. Got it all the dirt filled back in the back, and I think we're much better than we were before.